Weekends with Jason Olbourne on today's News Talk, TNT.
Well, hello and welcome to Weekends. This is the Sunday edition. We're live out of the Gold Coast in Australia. I'm here in Maitland, New South Wales. So we are dominating the East Coast, and for once the times have actually aligned. Daylight saving is officially over. We're all on the same timeline on the East Coast of Australia. Well, this is the moment that many, certainly the people that are following me on my social media pages, have been asking for. It's finally arrived. Bigtree is in the house and he will be on the show in just a moment. And we're revved up and we're going to go where others dare not to even think about. And that's the beautiful thing about independent media. At a time when the mainstream ratings are plummeting, they can't work out why. Well, you could start by giving us the truth. But stop treating us like children, stop treating us like cattle, and creating this second-class citizen society where somehow we don't even have autonomy over our own bodies. That's how bad it's got, and we're going to pull it apart with the frontman for the High Wire, the creator of ICANN. Just a moment. Also coming up on today's show, Billboard Chris will be up in the next hour. He comes from Vancouver in Canada, and he also caused a stir in Australia with the Australian government demanding that Twitter remove his post about something to do with transgender. It got so heated that Elon Musk has decided to sue the Australian government. How about that? And following in third hour, Senator Ralph Babet will be with me. He's going to talk about the new Governor General, the digital ID law that just passed, well, the bill, I should say, that passed through the Senate last week, and also to do with his excess deaths inquiry, the first of its kind in the world. And in the final hour, Mark Hendricks, mountain climber, geologist. He's going to blow the lid on something that I reckon that not many people are aware of, the closing of national parks in Australia, based on the fact of 0 injuries allowed, and it all falls into the exact same category. Well, you know what I'm talking about. Managed retreat, that type of exercise, and another way that the fun police and the government are trying to use the green message to stifle any form of entertainment across the world. It's just madness, isn't it? So this is going to be a big show, but let me introduce you to our first guest today. Bigtree is one of the world's most powerful voices for the vaccine risk awareness movement. He's the founder of the non-profit Informed Consent Action Network and host of the breakout internet talk show, The High Wire, the fastest growing program in the natural health arena with over 100 million views. Del's career as an Emmy-winning producer of the CBS talk show The Doctors changed profoundly when he produced the documentary Vaxxed, From Cover-Up to Catastrophe. Since its release, the film is credited with igniting a revolution against pharmaceutical tyranny around the world. Del's non-profit, the Informed Consent Action Network, or ICANN, is leading worldwide investigations into drug and vaccine fraud that have already resulted in multiple winning lawsuits against the US government agencies, Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health, CDC, and FDA. Del Bigtree, welcome to Weekends.
Jason, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure.
Well, likewise, Del, and as I said in the intro, there are many people that have been waiting and asking for you to come on to the show. And to paint a little bit of a picture, when you were out there making that incredible film, possibly the most censored of all time, and that film is called Vaxxed, I was just one of many on social media asking questions and being punished one way or another through censorship, not being allowed to see what was going on. Now, my memory, and I hope that you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Robert De Niro in his Tribeca Film Festival announced that he would be playing this film, and I think that's where the controversy began. Can you recall what happened and how this all started back in 2016?
Well, sure. It was a sort of seismic shift in my career was, with that film. It's funny. We'd been accepted into Tribeca Film Festival. Just a little sort of backstory that I don't usually tell, but I knew the film was incredibly controversial. I recognized that this vaccine issue was going to be a third rail. And so I had reached out to the PR people at Tribeca Film Festival. And I said, look, I got the lead person on the phone. I said, I'm a filmmaker. I've made this film back. We're going to be screening. Is there any way we could just not announce what the film is about? Because all the films were starting to be announced in the papers. I said, why don't you just say mystery screening, a film so controversial that you won't know what it's about till you're in the theater? And I remember the PR person laughed and said, oh, it's a great PR trick, but we're used to controversial documentaries. We'll be just fine. Just didn't take me seriously. And so, sure enough, about a week later, we were announced with 40 other films in the sort of documentary category, and the gates of hell opened up. Every mainstream news outlet in the world was attacking Tribeca Film Festival. How could you have this movie? Children are going to die. It was absolutely crazy. So there was already this firestorm going on when Robert De Niro, I don't know, it was probably 3 or 4 days into this really incredible attack by mainstream media, stepped forward and announced that, of course, he was one of two founders of Tribeca. And he said, we are going to screen this film. And then he said something that no one knew really in the world before that moment. He said, my wife and I have a child with autism. We believe that vaccines have contributed to that diagnosis, and this film will play. I remember I had friends in Hollywood that reached out to me right after that and said, well, I thought you were screwed, Del, but you're made, man. Robert De Niro just backed you up. You're good to go. I really did think that. And then, but about 74 hours later, we still got kicked out of the festival. It was ABC News had just interviewed me. They were talking about the most controversial film Tribeca had ever had. And then in the moment before that was going to air on the news, we got told they're pulling you from the festival, which just shows you, I mean, this is how controversial it was that one of the founders, arguably one of the most popular actors in the world, supported our film. And even that wasn't enough to keep us in that festival lineup. When our distribution company was arguing with with Tribeca's people, they kept saying, why are you kicking this film out of the festival? And they said, well, there's some inaccuracies in the science. And so our producers and everybody would say, well, what inaccuracies? I mean, certainly our filmmakers should be allowed to defend this film. Tell us what the problem is and let us show you their data. And remember, these festivals like Tribeca had screened Fahrenheit 9/11 that basically accused George Bush of bombing the World Trade Center. So, obviously they'll let things slide in a documentary, wherever you are on that topic. They're used to controversial issues. Why this one? And we pressured them, and apparently about an hour of arguing, they finally said, fine. Sloan Kettering has been one of our, major donors since the day we started, and they don't want this film to screen. And that's what it's all about, is a pharmaceutical sponsor that got us kicked out of the festival. In the moment, it was really a horrific feeling. But I remember the moment it happened, and I thought, that's it. That's the end of my career. I've left my television career behind. The film I thought was going to screen at, Tribeca Film Festival. And so for about 5 minutes, I was really upset. But then it just slowly kicked in. I said, well, wait a minute. I've never heard of a film being kicked out of Tribeca Film Festival. I was like, that's like historic. And being a media guy, I was like, I can make something out of that. And of course, that controversy ended up giving us more free press than we could ever dream. We had lines down the block in every theater we played in for over a year, even in Australia, even in England, even in Japan. I mean, it was a massive international success. And I honestly don't think that would have happened if they hadn't kicked us out of Tribeca. So, I think God blessed us with, a wild little trick of advertising, if you will.
If ever there was a better example of making lemonade out of lemons, Del, that was it. Extraordinary. Now, if we could just recap for those that may not have seen the film, the idea behind it is that in real time, you're recording conversations with the CDC that are revealing that the data sets keep changing because something is seeping out, and that is that it's not friendly to the idea that the MMR is actually as good as it's meant to be. And you'll be aware of the use of my language here to avoid the censorship that comes through. It's a little bit coded, but this is the point, isn't it? That that the data was being manipulated to tell us something was safe when it probably wasn't.
Well, if you're worried about, how you're going to say something, I'm probably not the right guest to have because I haven't danced around this at all. But I'll tell you this, at the center of this, the film that we made, Vax, was a whistleblower from inside the CDC. He was their epidemiologist. So he was literally the guy crunching all the numbers. They were doing a study back in 2000 looking at a group of about 1,500 children from Atlanta. So it had a very large African American community in it. So a lot of African American boys and girls. But what they were looking at was there was this, it was really based on the fact that Dr. Andrew Wakefield in England had made this statement that he believed the MMR was somehow causally connected to the MMR vaccine. And so the CDC was doing this study to try and refute that, to say there's no problem with the MMR, and it was a timing study. What they were looking at, they were asking the question, if this vaccine does contribute to autism, then the next question would be, the earlier you get it, does it make it more dangerous? And so what they looked at was children that got the MMR vaccine, before or at about 12 months, and those that waited till after 18 months. And what they discovered was about a 4.5% increase in autism amongst those that got the vaccine early, which was shocking and it was irrefutable. And so, what the CDC ended up doing, based on what this whistleblower, Dr. William Thompson, said, and by the way, he didn't just say it, he provided us all of the original documents, all of the strategy that they were going to use in this study. And they committed scientific fraud. They kicked half the kids off the study in the middle of the study to try and change the outcome and sort of erase this problem that they were seeing. That's what the film is about. The film ultimately, I would say, some people say Vax proves that the MMR causes autism. That's not true. I'm very scientific and I'm very clear on what we did prove. What we did prove was that your top scientists at the CDC did a study to try and show that the MMR was safe and not connected to autism. And that study went so far south, they committed scientific fraud to hide that evidence. And what is really disturbing about that study is that was the last study ever done in the United States of America. This fraud went forward and they ended up hiding all of the problems with it. They knew that it looked like it was causally related to autism. Now, let's be clear. It was only 1,500 kids. That should have triggered more studies. They definitely saw the red flag of all red flags, and they should have said, let's get deeper into this. Instead, they did the opposite. They whitewashed the whole study. They kicked kids off the study to manipulate and get what they wanted out of that study. And in the end, that study was used in the United States of America to say, that's it. It's over. We've proved that vaccines don't cause autism. We're never investing another red cent in this. So when we hear on the news, oh, that's the most studies that's ever been done on vaccines and autism, it's an absolute lie. And not one red penny has been spent on the connection between vaccines and autism from our regulatory agencies in America since 2000. So 24 years now, even though somewhere between 50 to 80%, depending on the polls, of parents of autistic children believe they watched it happen with their own eyes after vaccination. So when you think about it, this is like having eyewitnesses to a crime. 80% of them are pointing to one person in that lineup. The CDC steps in, takes that person out of the lineup, and says, now who is it? And that's what they've been doing for 24 years. And you'll hear them on the news say, well, we don't really know what's causing autism, but one thing we do know is that it's not vaccines, which is a crazy statement. If you don't know what a disease is, if you don't know why it's increasing at some skyrocketing level, what is it that you actually know to be able to say it's not vaccines? And of course, if you watch my show, The High Wire, and you've watched the work we've done on the Informed Consent Action Network, our lawsuits, we have deposed the biggest vaccine scientist in the world, Dr. Stanley Plotkin, who wrote literally the textbook that is used around the world on vaccines is called Plotkin on Vaccines. It's the Bible of vaccinology. One of his co-writers is Catherine Edwards. I have both of them on the stand under oath on camera because we were in the case and we got them to admit under oath that they basically were lying when they had said vaccines don't cause autism. In one of the videos that you can see on my website, just go to thehighwire.com and type in Catherine Edwards. You will watch our lawyers say, DTaP vaccine. How many studies do you have to show it doesn't cause vaccine? And she says, none. And in the end, we go through every vaccine. She cannot point out one study. And so that's where we're at. This is a giant hoax happening around the world. You hear there's a mountain of evidence. I'm telling you, there is not a mountain. There is not a molehill. There is not even a bump. They don't have anything. It's one of the biggest lies ever told.
I cannot agree with you anymore, and I'm thrilled that you're able to share this information on this show here on TNT Radio. For those that are watching, www.tntradio.live, you can watch us or listen to us live there. That will pass you through to YouTube. You can go on to Rumble, of course, and watch us there as well. And don't forget to download the various different shows that you'd like to see on this show and all shows here on TNT Radio. What we're going to do is going to take a break, and we're going to come back and get stuck into a lot more, because I'm going to ask Del about the COVID origins and what he sees as going on. We're going to talk about what RFK Jr. is running for president, what he might do if he gets into the Oval Office. And there's a whole lot more that I want to talk to Del about. You don't want to go anywhere. This is the only place to be. For a complete list of shows and our schedule offered on TNT Radio, simply visit our website, tntradio.live. We serve up the latest news and current affairs presented by a host of credible and expert commentators who can separate fact from fiction, truth from propaganda, keeping you up to speed on today's News Talk TNT.
TNT's Mark Morano.
According to a top UN climate advisor and Time Magazine's 2023 Woman of the Year, has now declared that the climate crisis is not just man-made. You all knew that our SUVs were causing a crisis. It's white man-made.
The climate crisis is man-made. And it's not just man-made, it's white man-made.
Now you have it. If you want to stop the climate crisis, the climate emergency, we start by protecting Black trans women, children, Indigenous people, and whoever else as the favorite identity politics group of the day.
Mark Morano on today's News Talk TNT. TNT is an independent global news talk station that does what others only say they do. TNT is a live radio and TV broadcaster that simply tells the truth 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No one in the world does what we do, crisscrossing the globe, providing credible news and opinion all day and all night. In 2.5 years, TNT has become a credible and exciting platform with brilliant hosts and staff. It's a critical time, and we must continue to call out the misinformation and propaganda from mainstream media and their powerful sponsors. We're now appealing to our many friends and supporters around the world to go to tntradio.live and make a small donation to TNT while we seek the right investors to continue our important mission. Today's News Talk Radio.
Come on, let the man talk.
We never censor our hosts.
Good. Now, talk.
Uncensored news.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Isn't that a breath of fresh air when you can just rip off the Band-Aid and talk about what it is you want to, even if I was a little bit dancing around it in the last hour, because I don't want to miss a moment of what Del Bigtree has to say. Just quickly, if you are on our website and you want to check the episodes on weekends, you will see in recent weeks we had Jerome Corsi, Michael Tellinger, Dr. Merrill Nass, Professor Ian Plimer, Praying Medic Dave Hayes, and Jim DiEugenio as some of the other interviews you might like to watch back if you haven't been here before. Now, Del, if we look at the COVID era, it was almost as if we were told in advance, Anthony Fauci in 2017, promising that Donald Trump would have a surprise outbreak in his term of office. Amazing how that man can see around corners. He also told us that the COVID virus, well, it originated from a Wuhan lab. Well, that has proven to be a complete furphy. So I'm wondering, what was your take when you saw Agenda 201 at the first point, and then we'll advance from there?
You know, of course, as you know, within the same year that we had the pandemic, you know, we watched this rehearsal where some of the top scientists from around the world and media people all got together and played basically a Dungeons and Dragons version of the COVID pandemic. And it was even all based around a coronavirus. And they, in the Event 201, talked about how they didn't have a vaccine ready. We had to ramp it up. They talked about everyone would have to wear masks. I mean, all of it was pre-rehearsed. So it is quite shocking. Now, I want to say, as we get in this conversation, I am not a conspiracy theorist. So I stick to what I can prove. And so for people, there's a lot of people that want me to say it was planned, it was a pandemic. I haven't fully come to that conclusion. And though there's a lot of evidence that sort of points in that direction, what I can say I know for sure is that the governments of the world saw an opportunity with this coronavirus, and they made it a behemoth, monster from hell that made us lock down the world. And what we know now, and what we knew really just a few weeks in after China, and by the time we got to Italy, I was crunching the numbers. We had a cruise ship where everyone got sick and it hit Florida. We started dialing in on really the death rate of this virus. And we knew very, very early on, and I love playing past episodes of my show, that the death rate of COVID, ended up being 0.35% around the world, 0.35%, a third of 1% essentially, which puts it right smack dab in the middle of a relatively strong flu season. Now, that's not to say that there weren't people in real risk. This was a strange virus in that viruses like this tend to make children sick first. Respiratory viruses, things like that. It's usually our kids, bring it back from preschools. This was something different. This one really went after the elderly in a strange way. And so if you were over the age of 70, and more specifically in that age category, had two other comorbidities. What we found were those who were dying had at least two comorbidities, meaning they also had diabetes, they were also obese, they also had cancer or heart disease and things like that had weakened immune systems. They were at risk. But for everybody that was healthy and under the age of 70, this was really nothing more than the common cold. And frankly, the CDC just about 2 weeks ago put out a call to the world, the world basically saying, treat this just like a flu. And so what's changed? Nothing's really changed. This virus is still here. It's now endemic around the world. What changed is whatever the agenda was, that agenda seems to be over for the moment. And I think mostly because a lot of people pushed back and a lot of people woke up during this and lost their confidence in their faith in our regulatory agencies, and specifically the CDC, the FDA, and the HHS for the United States of America, which, I know I'm talking to Australia there, I mean, you guys know we decide the fate of the world. Our science is, whatever Tony Fauci says, the world has to answer to. I didn't answer to it. Neither did 30% of America. And now less than 10% are getting the booster shots here in America, which means that is a total destruction in confidence amongst the American population looking at our regulatory agencies.
The distrust in our institutions has never been at a level as low as we've seen, and it's represented by the statistics that you provided there in the uptake of boosters. I've seen statistics in some countries where it's below 1% at the third jab. They were just already pulling out of it and seeing what was going on there. So you wonder, this agenda with the WHO and future pandemic treaty frameworks, etc., and wondering how it is that they're going to enforce compulsory medicine. In Australia, Del, we're a very odd society in that, the lucky country, she'll be right attitude, very apathetic. But 96% of 16 and over, it was reported across the country, had taken the jab. Now, even though the Prime Minister of the country at the time said nothing is mandatory, that was a bit of a fib as well, because that was passed to the states, who then passed it to individual companies to institute said mandates, workplace mandates that were compulsory. Otherwise, you lost your job. Today, we now learned that these companies that were forced to do that now are told to bear the brunt of any vaccine injury. So this type of deceptive conduct from the government has really hit people in the face. race. Now, ironically, the digital ID bill was passed through the Senate instead of the House of Representatives here a little over a week ago, without debate. The government of the day refusing to allow debate and just passing it through, almost as if that they're expecting that because 96% of the country took the jab, that they'll use the same recipe. Ironically, the same government minister, Katie Gallagher, comes out and says, well, the jab wasn't mandatory, neither will be digital ID. How do you think that the governments of the day, Australia, America, the rest of the world, are going to navigate this distrust from here? Or is this the beginning of the fall of Babylon, let's say?
Well, look, we have a lot of work to do as civilians around the world. And what I say about COVID was every other world war we have ever studied was, one nation against another, maybe a continent against another continent. This was like something we've never seen. This was literally an attack by virtually every government in the world against its own citizens. So there was an agenda brought in the guise of health to rob every citizen in the world of their freedom. And look what's come out of it. Discussions of, 15-minute cities, like where we're not going to be able to get, 15 miles from our house. You had police that looked like stormtroopers from Star Wars clubbing people in the streets for what? For breathing the air, for deciding that they thought, you know what, so be it. I want to live and breathe the air, and I think I'm going to be okay. And now we know they would have been okay. I mean, this is an unbelievable precedent. And that digital ID, sure, they'll say it's not mandatory, except that if your driver's license works the way ours does here in Texas, I didn't even have a choice. Like I came from California. I need a Texas driver's license. It's not like you're given an opportunity to say, hey, I want the one that's not a digital ID. It just doesn't exist. So whenever your next driver's license, wears out and you've got to go in and re-up and take a driver's test, you just opted into a surveillance system where now they have all of your data. They're tracking everywhere you're going, everything you're doing. This is, as Robert Kennedy Jr. put so clearly, a turnkey totalitarian nightmare. We have face recognition cameras everywhere we go. That's true in your country too. Now they're going to have AI software studying you, monitoring you, making files about you, and watching what you're buying, watching how you shop. What are you looking at online? This is the future. And we've watched movies about this. It's happening in real time. And we really need to get involved. We really need to start looking at the politicians, those handful of politicians that have stood up. I think you've got one coming up later on the show that are, really up against a tidal wave of authoritarianism right now. So we've got to stand up. Bobby Kennedy, I was just watching one of the videos that we put out for him, and I'm trying to remember what he says. Is like there's really three things. When the government this is what he said. Here's the three things you have to know about totalitarianism. Any law that the government puts in place to control you, they will never take away based on their own, intention or energy. Number two, any law they put in place, they will use and abuse to the absolute extent that they are allowed to. And number three, no one has ever complied their way out of totalitarianism. So that is what we're facing. And so we've got to ask ourselves, what are we going to do as societies? What are we going to do? We're going to allow this to happen. We were robbed of our rights. Our jobs were shut down. We were locked in our homes. And frankly, too many of us put up with it.
Well, we certainly did. And the idea of complying your way out of totalitarianism, I'll take an injection so I can go along and have a beer at the pub with my friends on a Friday night, is just a bridge too far. Now, I'm glad that you brought up Robert Kennedy Jr., a complete breath of fresh air in this current political system. And of course, it looks very much like a three-horse race, which is kind of wonderful. And many people speculating whether Kennedy will get involved one way or another. But we know that Robert Kennedy Jr., like his uncle, like his late father, like his cousin, is part of American royalty, inverted commas, so to speak. The Kennedys seem to operate outside of the rest of the system, and an ability to serve the public like we've probably never really seen before or after. It's kind of like that they're part of an establishment, but they're an independent part of it. And of course, Bobby's campaign, where he started off as a Democratic candidate, that was kind of whitewashed very quickly and left to become an independent, it shows us that he's beyond party politics and certainly doesn't want to be anybody's puppet. This is a big deal. Now, in all of this, his remarkable work that he's done, the books that he's written, I wanted to get to the scenario here. Do you think that if he were to step into the Oval Office or some other high office, that he would go after the origins of COVID, unlike any other sort of lame attempt that we saw, certainly Joe Biden's attempt to send Peter Daszak over from Eco Health Alliance to pretend to walk through Wuhan and say, "Oh, can't see anything here with my blinkers on." Do you think that Bobby will be able to really get down to it and work out what actually happened?
Yeah, and before I start, let me take off one hat. Let me take off my Informed Consent Action Network, host of the Highwire hat. I want to explain to the audience, just so that everyone knows, I do have a bias on this conversation. I'm now the director of communications for Robert Kennedy Jr. So, take that with a grain of salt. What I'm saying comes from the fact that I'm inside the campaign, and I want people to question. You should be asking questions. I say all that. I want you to be totally informed. I will say this: we have an opportunity of my lifetime, which is why I am, doubling up, working harder than I ever have to keep a nonprofit going on one hand and to deliver communications and video, and we are sweeping the internet. We've done an amazing job when the mainstream media's tried to shut Bobby down. We were able to get him on every podcast, make viral videos. And it's just this week, once again, is now polling as the most favorable presidential candidate in America. He beats Joe Biden. He beats Donald Trump. When we watch the primaries in this country, both Biden and Trump, it's the lowest voter turnout we've ever seen. Somewhere between 60 and 70% of Americans wish they had a different choice than Donald Trump and Joe Biden. So we're running a third party candidate, an independent candidate. And I think the most powerful moment in history. I think this election is so important. And so what is Bobby running on? He has, he's been all over the world. He's been very clear that he wants to investigate the very same things that I want to investigate and have been investigating, which is what is causing the chronic disease epidemic. It is off the charts. When we look at it, as he said, when John Kennedy was president of the United States, about 6% of Americans had a chronic illness. It is somewhere around 60% of Americans have a chronic illness. That means either a neurological disorder or an autoimmune disease. He's very clear. When he was a child, a doctor might see, think about this, one case of diabetes in their lifetime. Now, 1 in 3 American children is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Something's gone tragically wrong. You couldn't find a peanut allergy when Robert Kennedy Jr. was a kid. Now you can't have a peanut on a plane. There is something wrong with our species, and we've got to ask ourselves what. And so, yes, Robert Kennedy Jr. is running on that issue. He's saying, if I don't end the chronic disease epidemic in the first 4 years, then fire me. How's he going to do that? Well, we know that our government has been captured by corporations. They've been captured by Pfizer and Moderna and Monsanto and all the pesticide companies and Exxon and the oil companies. Every one of our regulatory agencies that your nation trusts is doing proper science is actually only doing science that is funded by the corporations that we're supposed to be protected from. Instead, the corporations are being protected from us. Our regulatory agencies are keeping us from being able to sue Monsanto, sue Pfizer, sue Moderna. And I'm sure people will say, oh, we just slipped up. We all know that there's liability protections for vaccines. Did you know that they're actually trying to pass a law to protect Monsanto and pesticides in America? That once the FDA has said it's safe, they want to say you can never sue us again. This is how corrupt the system is, and that's what Robert Kennedy Jr. represents. He's been a lawyer, he's been an environmental attorney his entire career. He has sued these agencies. He has won against the FDA, the CDC. Some of those cases, my nonprofit, we worked together on them. We won against the NIH, National Institutes of Health. He's won against USDA on farming practices. So this is a fighter that is going in. I believe he's going to win, or I wouldn't be here. He is a winner. He wins lawsuits when no one else could. He knows where the bodies are buried. And frankly, you know, even when it comes to what happened to his father and his uncle, he's going to investigate that too. But I want to correct one thing. I mean, and not to really disparage the Kennedy family, but a lot of them have been absorbed by the system. Many of them are in the Biden administration. They're not that outside the system. Bobby is different. He really is a lone wolf here. And I think he embodies what John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, his father, really stood for. And I think an argument could be made in the United States of America that we lost our freedom, that we lost our way. They assassinated John F. Kennedy because he was looking at Central Reserve banking systems, and he was looking at the CIA's forever wars, dragging us into Cuban Missile Crises, dragging us into war, Vietnam, wanted out. Robert Kennedy, you know, he's killed. Then his younger brother steps up. Same thing, says, I am not going to let the corruption of this government. We are kicking these people out. And he was killed too. From that moment on, when Bobby Kennedy's father was assassinated, I think in that moment, our country took a turn into what I would call fascism now, which is corporate controlled government. We are now controlled by the oligarchs of corporate power, the pharmaceutical industry, the oil and gas industry, the big agricultural industry, which we're seeing is shutting down our farms all around the world. We're talking about eating crickets and insects instead of meat. They're spraying all of our food with deadly toxic chemicals, even vegetables. Those aren't even healthy anymore. We're in real trouble here. Robert Kennedy Jr. represents a return to that dream, that beacon of light and hope that the United States of America was supposed to represent to the world. Instead, we've been dragging Australia and dragging Canada and dragging the world into corporate capture and authoritarianism. That's going to stop the day Robert Kennedy Jr. takes office.
It's just a wonderful thought to feel that there is somebody out there that will buck the system, to somebody who's building the infrastructure around them, such as yourself, Del, to build an enormous message for people to realize at long last there is change in the wind, or at least the determination of it. Many people felt that in 2015, when Bernie Sanders announced that he was going to run for office as the independent, who effectively just became a Democrat Velcroed on, if you will, the most disappointing convention we saw in June, when he virtually capitulated at that point. But with Bobby, it's very, very different. I, for one, believe that the 2-year-old John F. Kennedy Jr. saluting at his father's funeral was the beginning of the comeback, of the return of the Kennedys one way or another to achieve justice, and realize that at that moment when his father was slain was the time that America was stolen. America lost its interests and the spy networks took over the world. And I just find it fascinating that here we have just a week or so ago on this program, Jerome Corsi, who'd written a book on the JFK assassination called The Final Analysis, who revealed forensic evidence that proved that X-rays were manipulated. And so the book is all about the proving that Oswald could not have killed Kennedy, and to point to where this goes. He believes it's the definitive book on the subject. And of course, he actually reached out to Bobby as well, not for an endorsement or anything, just to let him know that it was out there. So it's fascinating. And the first question I actually asked Jerome Corsi, why does it take a conservative to solve a progressive murder? To which got a chuckle, but it just shows you the hypocrisy of the situation. Not really left versus right. It seems to be totalitarianism versus freedom, nationalism versus globalism, so many different ways to frame it all. Now, we do have to take a break, and we'll come back with more. I'm with Del Bigtree. Thank you for watching. Please tell your friends, share this video if you can. This is the one and only TNT Radio. You're watching Weekends with Jason Olbourne. I'll be back in a moment here on TNT.
I said, could she die? And the doctor said she could. It was so scary.
When I started clawing at my neck and trying to breathe, and I thought, what are we going to do if I die here? How's everyone going to go on?
When someone's gravely sick or injured in the bush, they rely on the Royal Flying Doctor Service. But now the Flying Doctor needs your help to fund vital medical equipment and supplies. Please search Flying Doctor online to give a regular gift of just $10. You can help equip the Flying Doctor's teams to respond to any emergency anywhere. Search Flying Doctor online. Become a part of the Royal Flying Doctor Service and help save lives in the bush.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too...
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
Discussing local, national, and international issues. Weekends with Jason Olbourne on today's News Talk, TNT.
And welcome back to Weekends. Coming up in the next hour, Billboard Chris will be here from Vancouver talking about the Elon Musk court action against the Australian government caused by him, and then Senator Ralph Babette straight after. But my guest this hour is Del Bigtree. Now, Del, recently on your website, The Highwire, one of the, leading shows in the world now, 100 million views, quite incredible. You recap comments from media pundit Bill Maher, who seems to sort of bob between left and right, part of the mainstream, but seemingly wants to get out, doesn't even believe the narrative anymore. And he says that how was it that people who guessed seem to get it right better than authority? But you take it one step further. They weren't guesses. They were kind of obvious. I was hoping that you could recap that segment.
Sure. I mean, Bill Maher is a very interesting character. And for many of us, I feel like he's like my little kid brother. I feel like I'm watching him go through the same journey I did, about 7 or 8 years ago. And it's just a matter of time. He still calls himself a liberal. For some reason, he still bows down to that altar of the Democratic National Committee, but I think those days are numbered. I think he's going to come to the same conclusion that I am, that the corruption is so deep. And really, that's the piece he did last week on his show. He basically said, now we've all got to admit that the people we called crazy, maybe they just had a good guess, but they sure got it right when it came to the COVID pandemic, and we got it dead wrong. And that is the truth. But I just played each part that he talked about and showed where we were at on the high wire. And I just want to be clear, people will say, how did the high wire, how were we so accurate, right? How did we know what we were talking about? How did we know that the vaccine was not going to stop transmission? How do, all the things, how do we know that masks didn't work? All of these things. At the moment that the pandemic hit, I was already speaking nationally. I was on a national speaking tour saying I believe the pandemic would be how they were going to try to force vaccinate every adult in the world. The writing was on the wall. We had studied every vaccine trial that has ever been done. My nonprofit and the work that I've done, there's no reporter in the world, and I challenge anyone, come forward if you think you're that person. It's not, I'm just saying, I decided that this vaccine issue was more interesting to me than anything else. Once I made Vax, that was one vaccine. I wanted to know about the other 16 vaccines we're giving in 72 doses. So I started a nonprofit. I started the high wire, and I got one of the best constitutional legal teams put together so I could sue the government. Since they want to protect liability, I needed to get to the answers. So we have spent millions and millions of dollars, almost $5 to I'd say over $5 million a year at least suing the government of the United States to get the answers. I don't know any other reporter that's done that. But in that, I want to be really clear what we proved. Not a single, for everyone out there, not a single childhood vaccine that we've given our kids was ever tested with a double-blind, inert placebo study, otherwise known as the randomized control trial. This is the trial that determines safety for all pharmaceutical products. Every childhood vaccine is skipping this process. So there's absolutely no way for them to say that vaccines are safe. They cannot do it. It's a lie when they do. If they say they have not done, there's only one way to determine safety. That's with the trials that they do not do. So that's what we've uncovered. And so, when we get into the middle of this, when we look at, what are we really discussing? What Bill Maher talked when COVID came along, this is my point. We already knew how all the lies were told. We'd studied every trial, but no one was listening to us. Everyone wanted to believe that their MMR vaccine was safe or that their hepatitis B vaccine they're giving on day one of life. There's got to be a reason my doctor's making me give that. But we knew that no trial had ever been done. So when COVID came along and Donald Trump said, I'm going to warp speed this vaccine, I said to my team, oh my God, this is going to be the moment where we're going to get to show the world how the sausage is made. So they stepped into our trap. We knew in many ways everything that was wrong with how vaccines are made. And so all we did was predict that they would make this vaccine, rush it out the exact same way, have the same fake science that they build around every other vaccine. And this time we were reporting on it in real time, not telling a retrospective story of something that happened 10 years ago. We were saying, look what they're doing right now. What did we say? We said right up front, and this is what Bill Maher says, lab origin. I think that I had someone on, I want to say it was January, February. I don't remember the dates and you could watch my show, The High Wire, from last week. But basically, right around January of 2020, I did the first show on lab origin. We brought on a scientist that said there appears to be an insert into this virus, which now we are all talking about, and every scientist cannot deny it. What we're calling is the furin cleavage site, which is it's this ability for this virus to ride on your furin in your body, which is ubiquitous throughout your body, which makes it highly infectious. The coronavirus has not had this ability prior to this moment. And what we saw in the scientists we interviewed in January, and now that we have all the emails through FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests from Tony Fauci, that all the scientists that worked for him and worked for EcoHealth Alliance, they were funding the Wuhan lab, they came back to Fauci very early on and said, hey, man, you're asking me, this looks like it's man-made. It looks like it must have come from a lab because this furin cleavage site, this ability this coronavirus now has to infect the human body, we can't find a single animal with it. We see no evolution that gets us to this point. It comes out of nowhere. They were all saying that, but then Tony Fauci literally pays those guys off. You can see multi-million-dollar investments made in the universities they work at, in programs that they're working on, and they all get together about 3 to 4 days later and wrote a paper that the world followed and said, there's no way it comes from a lab, it's only natural origin. I've done a show where I put all of the faces of those scientists that did that because they were all involved in emails where they said the exact opposite to Tony Fauci. And then they bowed down, kissed the ring, and lied to the world. These are the worst scientists the world will ever know. They should never be forgotten for what they did. Because now that cover-up and now that lie has been exposed, and now we know in the entire world, the FBI in the United States of America says no doubt it came from the Wuhan lab. So that was something that we predicted in January of 2020 on my show. I lost YouTube channels over this. I got kicked off of the internet for stating that. Another thing that Bill Maher brings up then is the fact that, masks and social distancing didn't work. I did a show, in the middle of 2020 showing all of the studies. We looked at all the studies. There were scientists saying every study ever done on masks shows that the particle size of coronavirus is far too small. It's like a chain link fence. It's just going to blow right through. Masks will be useless. We said that. I even showed on our show back, I think it was like May of 2020, when I said that the social distancing 6 foot distance wasn't scientific. There was actually a paper out that we found that it was a 14-year-old junior high school student that had put together the idea of social distancing for a science fair. That was the entire science behind it. And now Tony Fauci, I think it was about a month ago in front of the Congress, admitted to the world under oath, it just, the social distancing just kind of appeared it wasn't based on science. This is a man who we all remember said, if you question me, you're questioning the science. And now remember, if you take away social distancing, if that's not a real thing, then locking down makes no difference. Then all of the shutting down of our businesses, locking us in our homes, there's no reason to do it. So you could say, oh, well, it's just one part of this. That was literally the part that destroyed the world as we know it, and it had no basis in science whatsoever. The masks, I even did a show with my son where I put on a mask on my son and put in a CO2 monitor to see what the CO2 levels were, and it went off the Richter scale, meaning we were making our children breathe their own CO2, which would, the levels it was at, we would shut down any business that made their employees breathe oxygen levels that were that low and that high in CO2. We did that to our kids 8 hours a day. And I'm going to hurt some people right now. You did that to your kids. You let that happen while you as an adult went to your job, you shut your office door when no one's looking, and you took your mask off. And you sat there, oh, someone's coming around, you put your mask back on. Meanwhile, your kid was not allowed to do that. Your kid had a monitor watching them, the teacher, making them wear that thing 8 hours a day. We should be ashamed with ourselves with what we let happen to our children. It affected their brain development. It affected their ability to see each other smile. Depression is through the roof. All of the issues that we now see. I'm sorry, we got to take responsibility where responsibility is due. So that we proved. And then we said from the very beginning that vaccines were not going to stop transmission. It wasn't because we were psychic. When Tony Fauci and everyone was getting on TV and saying, get the vaccine. If you want to protect your neighbor, you've got to get the vaccine. Look what you guys did to each other. Look what they did to say, you are not doing your part of taking care of your neighbors if you don't take the vaccine. They lied and said that you were 95% effective in infecting your neighbor. That was a lie from day one. It wasn't guessing. We read the emergency use authorization. We looked at the trials themselves with Pfizer. And the emergency use authorization written by the FDA that allowed the vaccine to be released early, they said in it, these trials were unable to determine whether or not this vaccine is going to stop transmission. More studies will be needed in the future. So they were lying to the world. And now we're on shot number 9 for a vaccine that was supposed to stop the virus in its tracks. And I will tell you this one step further, that this virus still exists and we did not achieve herd immunity, which we would have had we not vaccinated. We now have a scary virus. We inserted a man-made ability for this to infect human cells in the furin cleavage site insert that honestly, we might have just evolved that virus 1,000 years. There are scientists saying it may never have found that ability to infect us. Coronaviruses weren't infected to human beings. We now know that in a lab, they gave a coronavirus an ability that it may have never found on its own. And so even though we think we're okay and we've gotten past it, that highly infectious virus is now endemic, meaning you can't kill it. And the vaccine keeps you from being able to kill it. Unvaccinated people caught it, killed it dead within a couple of days, and hold on to immunity for several years. But the vaccinated cannot stop this virus. It cultivates. Every vaccinated person in the world now is like a human petri dish. They are themselves gain of function research machines because their body doesn't stop it. This vaccine has taught their body to not fight it. I know this is crazy for people to understand, but the vaccine is the worst thing we ever did. So this virus has abilities that we've never seen before, and it's still evolving. This is something that this story is not over, and this damage is not over, and this crisis is not necessarily over, and is caused by our governments, our regulatory agencies, and guys like Tony Fauci, who should be in prison for having manipulated a virus and made it really a bioweapon that has swept the world.
Dil, a brilliant analysis, and thank you. And we've only got a couple of minutes left. You pointed to many things that a lot of us have been talking about over a long period of time. Coming down to the crux of it, is COVID the greatest crime against humanity in history? And if so, what should be the remedy for, or the punishment for, those that perpetrated said crime?
I mean, we have yet to see how many people this vaccine will kill. And it was a delivery system. You know, you have the gain of function research that was done. So you had the natural or whatever, you have the original virus. And then they packaged this virus, made it even more deadly and longer lasting in the vaccine, and then made everybody take that vaccine. They literally took a bioweapon and injected it into everyone around the world. We are seeing these turbo cancers. How many people will die of cancer from this? How many with the myocarditis? How many will die years down the road because their heart has been permanently injured? You know, the blood clots that we're seeing, all of this, who knows? I know that you're about to talk to one of your politicians looking at excess mortality. I think this story has only just begun. But when we look at this, these numbers, we're talking millions of people are now sick. Millions of people will die. I think that when we look back in history, this will have to have the same onerous thoughts as Nazi Germany. Really quickly before we go to thehighwire.com. If you want to see my film Vax, it's for free at thehighwire.com. Just type Vax in the search. Start looking through all the shows we've done. We've covered all these issues. Jason, thank you for doing the great work that you're doing. You're a hero. Everyone that stands up right now is a hero. This is our time. I still believe we win.
You've said exactly the sentiments that I've been sharing for a very long time. We will win this war. Del Bigtree, you are the one that's inspired millions of people. I'm in the chair because of the work directly that you've done. I can't thank you enough. Please head over to thehighwire.com and check it out. Also, ICAN, Informed Consent Action Network. Del Bigtree, absolute superstar. Can't believe we managed to speak to you today on your Saturday night. You never stop. Going to take a break and be back with more here on TNT.